Hi everyone, welcome to Nikki Bostwick Unfiltered. This is my first solo episode and I'm so excited to share with you guys today a little bit more about my background in history. And I'm going to be doing these solo episodes a lot more, but I think for the first one, the best way for me to start is by just kind of introducing my story. I always share about myself randomly in different podcast interviews and share about my background, but I've never done an episode where I kind of go all in on why I'm doing what I'm doing today and what's gotten me here and what I'm interested in doing moving forward. I think when you have a podcast, just your message, even just a platform, your message can change and your mission and what inspires you changes over time. So for me, I just want to start off by sharing my background before I also invite my sister and my husband and my mom and my dad and family members onto the podcast for context. So I'm Nikki and I'm a first-generation Iranian-American. My mom and my dad moved here when he was 20, and then my mom moved here when she was 18, and they're about 10 years apart. So my dad was here first and then he went back to Iran. He married my mom and they'd known each other. Their families had known each other. So my dad's brother was married to my mom's sister. His older brother was married to my mom's older half sister. So my mom didn't know that her sister was her half sister until the wedding day, until she married my dad's dad, because my mom's dad, she realized my mom's dad wasn't the one to walk her down the aisle. And she was so confused. She was like, Dad, what are you doing? And then she saw this other guy walking my aunt down. And that's when she found out that my aunt was her half sister. So that's already a fucked up situation in my opinion. So there's a lot of history to unpack, and the reason why I think it's really interesting to share is because I'm really passionate about generational trauma. And when your parents go through something traumatic or just anything in general, I believe that it has an imprint on you if it's not solved or resolved or worked through. So not only do I believe that my mom's experience and even my dad's can have an imprint on me, I also believe what my grandparents went through. So my mom's mom was 16 when she got pregnant with my aunt. And so this is the story I've been told. And then she left her husband at the time, which was unheard of, but her husband wanted 2 wives and they happened to be best friends, so he wanted both the best friends to be his wives, and one lived downstairs, one lived upstairs situation. And my grandma was 16 and she's like, no, I'm out. Both the wives were pregnant at the same time, but my grandma left. She went back home and then she married my grandpa and she was pregnant when they met. So basically, my grandpa, my mom's dad, did raise my aunt, but she did have a relationship with both dads. My grandpa ended up being the head of the Iranian CIA, so the head of Savak is what they call it. And during the Iranian Revolution, my mom was 12 and he was executed because he was the Shah's right-hand man. So my mom ended up losing her father when she was just 12 years old, and they lost everything because not only did her dad get executed, but they took everything from them, and all they had was an apartment under my grandmother's maiden name that they didn't find. And that's where my mom lived for another 4 or 5 years until she was married off to my dad and then ended up moving to the United States. During that time, though, she also lived in a war zone. So there was the Iran-Iraq war shortly after the revolution. So they were constantly going into bunkers, getting bombed on. So she had a really traumatic upbringing. then like the trauma started when she was 12, essentially. And my grandmother, she was the mother to 4 children. And I found out after I had my son, Truth, that my grandmother actually had also been pregnant once before. My aunt, I told you, like the first husband, she actually was pregnant with and gave birth to her son. And he ended up sadly like passing away when he was a year old or less than a year old. And that is new information that my mom just found out recently over the last couple of years, and then I found out, and my mom is doing a lot of work too. So we're all kind of unpacking our stuff. And my son has a genetic condition called MCAD. And I've been trying to figure out what side of the family it came from, because both my husband and I are carriers, but I could have gotten it. I could be a carrier through my mom's side or my dad's side. But I always thought maybe it was my dad's side because my grandmother, she gave birth 9 times, but 6 of them survived. So my grandparents have gone through a lot, and they moved here. My dad's parents moved here around the same time my mom moved here. And so my mom lived in the United States shortly after her dad was executed, got married, moved to the United States, like big changes, and lived here with my dad and his mom and dad and her under one roof. So, and there's like a reason I'm telling everyone this, and it's because my mom never had the opportunity to work through her trauma. She was always kind of living in survival mode. She even like got abducted and like kidnapped when she was in Iran before she moved to the United States. And that was like right around the time she either had gotten married but hadn't moved here yet, or was just about to be married off. And that person ended up being like a serial killer. And for some reason, she was able to get away. She was one of 2 people that he did not kill. Like, we kind of uncovered a lot of this recently too. He testified that she was one of 2 people that he did not hurt. So she's gone through a lot. And then she had my sister when she was 20. So that was like a lot that she went through within the span of 8 years before becoming a mom. And then she had me when she was 22. And she didn't speak any English, but she still went to a UC. She moved to California. She graduated from college. And that's a really big deal to both my parents. Education is a really, really big deal. And they both received their bachelor's degrees, even though they had a lot of hardship, and they're immigrants and they work through a lot. And so education is a big deal for them, and they've instilled that within my sister and I. But now, like, I totally have a different view. I think the UC system, or even just like colleges in general, are just like breeding grounds for liberal narratives and views. And I think being a liberal isn't a bad thing, but I think that when any side starts to push their views and narratives onto young and vulnerable populations, it's not okay. And I think it happens like starting at a young age, a very, very young age in the United States. So that's like, I digress. But my dad's side, so that's like my mom's story up until she had my sister and I. My dad's side, he moved here when he was 20. Did I say 18 earlier? I don't know. I think he was 20. He moved here when he was 20. He was on the East Coast somewhere. I think actually he was in Virginia. And then he was like, oh my gosh, everyone's racist here. I need to leave. Because this was like before the Iranian Revolution. And he made his way over to California. He was in San Diego, and he found like a group of friends there, one of which he had known from Iran, but basically had made new friends. And he came in a time where, like, during the hostage crisis, they had signs on the doors that said, like, no dogs, no Iranians. There was a lot of racism that he went through, and he started from having nothing. So classic, like, American dream story where he had basically $0. He was just here for school. He ended up becoming like a bus driver. There's like stories of him selling ice cream. He had like a lot of odd jobs. He was a bartender, but he's very smart. He's not very studious. But he was just very smart and knew how to make things work for himself. And he did get his bachelor's degree, and he was also really into art and engineering. I think he got his he was like a computer engineer or something in his degree, and then he minored in studio art. So he's very creative, and he went to Iran after college because he thought maybe he would still live there, but then because he hadn't lived there since before the revolution. So moving back, he realized like there's absolutely no way I can live here. And that's when he said to his family, like, we all need to move to the United States. And he moved back, and then he slowly started applying for them all to get here. He got his parents here. When I was 8 years old, my dad's family moved here. So his brother, his sister, my mom's sister, who is married to my dad's brother, moved here with my cousins. Like, all the siblings ended up moving here, and they lived with us. So my dad ended up convincing his whole family to move here. When his parents moved here, his sister moved here, and they had like a very tight Persian community. Like, when I was growing up, I didn't realize that everyone didn't speak Farsi. Like, I grew up speaking Farsi, and I spoke Farsi up until the age of 5. Like, that was my first language. And so I like felt like I was in Iran basically. And my mom's sister and my dad's sister, then when I was 8 years old, moved here. My mom's sister and dad's brother, who were married, they ended up moving in with us. Like, I lived with my 2 cousins and my aunt and my uncle at my house for a couple years. I was just 8 years old. And so this like thread of family living together, being together, supporting each other is like a foundation that I've grown up on. And I'm so appreciative to have that connection with my family. And as like the years went on, my family started to kind of become more Americanized. But I would say that like my mom has really held on to our Persian identity the most. I think my dad, he grew up here. It felt like for him, like he was 20 years old, and he has been here for 46 years. So like this is his home. He doesn't really identify necessarily with the Persian community, whereas like my mom is still the one sharing with me all of the traditions, all of the practices. So as a young girl, I was able to really reap the benefits of like having my grandmother be my caretaker. If my mom was gone or my dad was gone, like I lived with my grandparents. I was around my aunts and my uncles all the time. I had just built in like network of family, and I learned a lot about just Iranians. And another thing I think is really cool that my parents did was my grandmother was like Muslim, and so she really wanted us to go learn about the Quran. And there was a school here. I don't know how they found it, but like in Orange County, there's a big Persian community. So they signed my sister and I up for a school to go to learn about the Quran. I swear I only went like 3 or 4 times. but they would teach you like how to pray. And I don't really remember it much, but I remember having that being part of my childhood because my grandma cared about it so much and my parents didn't really, but they also felt like they wanted me to learn about Christianity. And my sister had this best friend who was a Jehovah's Witness. So my mom was like, oh, cool. Like Jehovah's Witnesses are so nice. You guys should come do Saturday school at our house. And so my sister and I had Saturday school on Saturdays at our house with her friend and her sister and their mom, and they would teach us about the Bible. So I had this opportunity to learn about the Quran and the Bible. I don't remember either really that well, but what I do remember is this understanding that God, and this is my belief today, it's like I believe in God, I believe in a higher power, but I don't necessarily connect with organized religion. And I think having that view, you know, there are a lot of people that I know that are devout Christians. I know people that believe in their religion and I respect their religion and I love them for it. And I love their morals and the values that they learn and the ethics behind it all. I think that that's so important and I want to instill that in my children. But I don't love what happens when you start to believe that your way is the only right way and that other people are going to end up in hell because they don't believe what you believe. I think what's beautiful about being spiritual and being connected to a higher power is that that's your faith, that's your belief system, that's your way to connect with something greater than yourself and with the earth. And that's your way of hopefully becoming more accepting of others. And the moment it becomes super dogmatic is where like war happens. And so I like to live in this place, in this bubble where there are morals, and like that's the common thread between most of the religions that I've known in my life. And I also grew up like with my parents fighting like 24/7. So having my grandparents around was a blessing for my sister and I. With my parents always having like a really, really difficult, traumatic, tumultuous, terrifying relationship. Like when I say terrifying, I mean I was like 5 years old hiding under covers because I was like watching them go at it at each other. Just like praying it would be over. So I have a lot of moments like that in my childhood that I could look back on that I thought like one of them wasn't going to be alive anymore after that fight or argument. So I went on to really like take on a lot of that emotional pain, and I like became bulimic. I felt like there was a lot of self-harm happening. And once I found yoga, it like completely changed my life. I was 16 years old and I woke up one morning. I'd been in trouble for smoking weed or something with my group of friends. Like I was totally going down, like I was going downhill basically. Ever since I was 14 or something, I was going downhill, I would say, in my life with my choice of friends and decisions I was making and things I was doing. And luckily, like my parents caught on even with their disagreements. Like they're such loving parents and aware that friends, like bad friends, are the worst for your children. And I'll never forget it. I lived through it. And I have friends that have passed away from drug use. So I don't take it lightly. And I'm so grateful for my parents to being strict and not letting me sleep over at other people's homes. But there was a lot of self-harm that happened. And one morning I was grounded and I just like woke up at 5:50 in the morning and I literally had no idea what yoga was. But I went up to my mom and I was like, Mom, there's this thing, it's called yoga and there's a class and I want you to drive me to it right now. It starts at 6 a.m. And I don't know how I knew that. I just like woke up, I'm not kidding, and like something in me told me you need to go to yoga. And that practice changed my life. It taught me to be more gentle with myself, to love myself, to integrate like all the chaos that was happening outside of me, to understand that I can't control anything outside of myself, and to work on myself. And then I went on to meet my husband like a year later, and like changed my life. I learned how to love myself, and everything has been a layer for me to learn how to love myself. Like yoga was the first layer. Then being in relationship with my husband, with someone else who loved me, like was another thing that taught me to love myself more, because it's like this other person has all this love for me, and so beautiful, and so I'm lovable and I can love myself. And then we had kids, and I had my son Truth, and that taught me to love myself even more and love and appreciate my body. So much beauty has come from like my journey, but I want to go back to yoga, because I think sometimes like these sorts of practices can seem like they are not good. Like I have friends that they are devout Christians now, and I don't know what they think about yoga. I haven't asked them, but I know that they're not comfortable with like yin and yang and different things that I find are just beautiful symbols of living in harmony with nature and with ourselves, and the shadow and the light. And so I'm curious if anyone's listening, like if you do have a religious practice, or you do identify with Christianity or any specific religion, like what are your thoughts about yoga, or that sort of like genre of wellness and mental health and meditation? Like what's the balance for you? Because for me, I think it all is a reminder to like go back to who we are as people, and to connect with others on that level. Anyway, so that's my upbringing. It was like really, really intense. I have an older sister. She went through a lot. She kind of like, she stayed in a lot. She didn't go out very much when we were growing up. And then she had her really difficult years when she went to college. And that's when it started for her, which I guess happens for a lot of people. Like I'm really grateful that my crazy years happened in high school, because I was like home and monitored by my mom and my dad and my sister. Whereas like in college, you're just like off on your own. And my husband, like that was like his situation, where in college was where he just kind of was like, he helped me a lot when I went through my time. And then in college, he like flunked out of like every class, like failed out of college multiple times because he was just partying so hard. And so I like took on the role of helping him get through that phase in his life, and he had helped me previously. But I met my high school sweetheart, so that's my husband. We went on to get married. We have 2 kids, and I started what is now The Fullest. It used to be called Poppy and Seed. I started that in 2014. And the reason I started it is because after my yoga experience and journey, I really like went on to like go further and further in the wellness world. And I moved to Oregon, went to college there. And in Oregon, like not everyone, I feel like everyone's either like a redneck or a hippie. Basically, that's my experience. And I became vegan. So I went like more the hippie route. And I was already vegetarian, so it wasn't like this huge transition, but I became vegan, and then I got into like raw foods, and I learned about this guy, David Wolfe, and I became a huge David Wolfe super fan. And he's like a really big wellness pioneer. If you don't know who he is, he's awesome. He started the company Sun Food, but he's brought so much information into the mainstream. And I like would go to his conferences, and they happened to be like in Orange County. So I would like come back from Oregon, went to his conferences. I went to culinary school for raw food in Los Angeles after college. And I started like traveling with David Wolf. He had trips to like Peru and Iceland, and I felt like I could learn a lot from him. And he had like incredible alternative information that I was really interested in. And I found out he was Persian, so I felt very connected to him. And so my husband and I have traveled with him. I've traveled with him. And I felt I had all this knowledge that I wanted to share with people that I knew, and in my community with like people my age in form of like content. So like not just through a podcast, but through a website. And it was called Poppy and Seed because I felt like at the time, like poppy flowers are the flower for California and for Iran. So it was like a way for me to kind of get back to my heritage. And it's just so interesting because saffron was like nowhere near on my radar, but saffron, is also something that is part of my heritage and is now my main focus. So I feel like I've always tried to like reconnect with my roots, and saffron has been part of that. But with Poppy and Seed, it was like specifically this idea of emotional trauma and emotions tied to our healing. And so the fullest kind of grew into that as well. And like my own experience with going on to heal from bulimia and other childhood traumas that I had. It was really diving deep into therapy and emotional issues I had that were mine, and also some were not mine, some I inherited. And I worked through all of that, and I thought that I could just work through all of it and then have my babies, and none of it was going to get passed down to my kids. But in reality, like trauma is just a layer after layer, and you feel like you've healed and then things come back. And it's just a dance between like where you're at in your life and what comes up, and if you're going to, or if you're willing to address it or not. So I've been on that path of really trying to be mindful and conscious and know where I'm coming from and what I can do to teach my children to take accountability as well, and also just live mindfully and raise them in a more conscious way than I was raised. And also for me, like I think a lot of what I love to share on this podcast or through my work is just how I live my life, and not that it's the right way, but just what works for me and what I'm finding, because I'm still on this path and on this journey of uncovering truth. And I feel like with the mainstream, you just don't necessarily find that. I'm interested in doing things because it feels right for me, and not because it's right for other people. It's not, I don't believe in a one size fits all approach to medicine. I don't believe that. Even like little things, like one example, I learned a lot about encapsulating your placenta and taking your placenta postpartum. And I was so excited to finally have a kid and do that. But I took my placenta and I didn't feel good. Like after I had my son, I took it like a few days and I was like, honestly, I feel really crazy with my placenta. And when I don't take it, I feel better. So I just stopped taking it. And with my daughter, I encapsulated it, but then I never took it. And I realized like so many of my friends took their placenta and it made them feel amazing. But for me, that just wasn't the case. So I felt that I didn't need it. And I don't need to just do something because other people are doing it, whether it's in the mainstream narrative or the alternative narrative. Like my message for everyone is do what feels right for you, and don't just listen because I told you or because anyone else told you, but really like tune into your body and like feel what feels right, because we're all different. And if we start to do things the same way, life would be like so boring. So that's just like one experience that I've had where I'm like, I just want to add to others and like show them what I'm doing that works for me, for my family. And yeah, part of like this episode for me is also just to kind of give you a foundation of like why I'm doing this, where I'm coming from. So like we'll get into more details with my family and why certain things happened or how they did. And I think like when I have my sister on, it'll be really interesting. But my sister and I have had like a horrible relationship our entire lives. I mean, it's been competitive. I've always felt that there was a lot of jealousy on her part. And I think she would like, I don't know if she would say that that's true, but I think she would admit to just feeling like self-conscious. And I think that leads to a feeling of jealousy, even if you're not actually jealous. I think it's like envy and sadness. And what's crazy is like our family has just gone through a lot through my parents' divorce and just like different legal stuff that we've dealt with over the last year or two, and it's brought my sister and I so close. Like every year I think we just get closer and closer, and having kids and having our own partners and starting our own families has brought us so incredibly close that I am just so grateful to be able to share this with other people, that like change is possible. Because growing up, like I always heard from people, oh, like when you get older, you'll become friends, or it's just like a phase. But for me, I really, really felt like there's absolutely no way my sister and I are ever going to be in a place where we genuinely like call each other just to like chat. Like she would call me and I would not be able to listen to like one word she said, and I'd just hang up because it was so triggering, because all she would do was complain, in my opinion. But I don't know, my perspective shift, like I don't know, something shifted, and now we have this like really, really tight relationship. And so I'm gonna have her on and we'll talk about it and we'll like uncover a lot there. But I think one of the really big ways we got to that point is by like uncovering our own deeply rooted traumas that we had, and we were both committed to it. And I did that with my sister and my mom. So like we weren't in therapy together, but I believe that if you're in a situation where maybe it's your husband or maybe it's like your sister or your mom or anyone in your life, like if you have a disagreement with them or a really like terrible relationship, but you want to work on it, the best gift is to just work on yourself and like pray and hope that they work on themselves. And in my situation, it happened because we all three worked on ourselves and we weren't trying to fix each other. And I think that's really beautiful too, when you like truly accept people for who they are. And that was like my experience with my mom. And I didn't talk to her for 18 months recently, like after I had my son, and I was pregnant with my daughter. The entire time we didn't talk. And I was so sad about that, and I didn't want that, but I felt like I needed to set boundaries. And like I really believe in boundaries. I believe if like you're listening to this and you are having like a difficult situation, boundaries are such a beautiful way to heal. And like the way I used my boundaries with my mom was like, right now this isn't working, and like we just cannot talk, because I don't want to ever be in a situation where all I do is argue with someone when I speak to them. Like that's not a path to moving forward either. So I feel like if you take a break and you're able to just like focus on yourself and focus on your life and focus on what it is that you want out of this relationship. Is it a relationship that you want? Like obviously for me, I did want a relationship with my mom, but I didn't want it to be the way that it was. And when you're able to like take some time to reflect and then come back because you want to come back, because you want to make things better, but also because you have requests. Like, that's so beautiful. So for me, and if you're interested in this story, like, I have an interview with Matthew and Teresies Englehart. They're the founders of Cafe Gratitude, and I had them on my podcast years ago, and they kind of guided me through it in the conversation in the podcast. Like, they said, you know, Nikki, like, you need to learn, like, make a request from your mother. And for me, my request was that she apologizes. And I think in today's world, like, we can't ask for an apology because it seems as though, like, if you ask for an apology, it's because you think you're right and they're wrong. But there's like validity to wanting someone to apologize to you because they wronged you, but that you can also make an apology back if you've done something to hurt them. So for me, like, I didn't want an apology from my mom just so like I was right and she was wrong. I wanted one because I wanted to know, like, sincerely understand from her, like, why she did what she did. And so anyways, I, like, made that request because it was up to her if she wanted to apologize or not. And and she did. And my other request was, like, please, can you work on yourself? Like, if we're going to have a relationship, that means we both have to work on ourselves. And can you commit to therapy? Because you've never healed all, like, and I told you guys, like, she's gone through a lot. Her dad was executed. She got married off. She didn't have a good relationship with her husband. Like, all of these things happened, and she never once took the time to work on herself, to heal that. So that was my one request. And after having time to have boundaries, I was able to find out, like, what it was that I think was triggering the situation. And then the rest is history. Like, I talk to my mom every day, and it's been so beautiful, and also has meant so much to me that she said, yes, like, I will do that. I will talk to these people. I will go and, like, you know, talk to the woman that, like, for me, the craniosacral therapist, like, it's not necessarily that you have to do talk therapy. Like, you can do body work, you can do stuff to just work on yourself. And that's important to me. And that's something that I ask everyone that I'm in a relationship with, like, and I want to do that for myself too. So anyways, my mom and I are really close now, and I want to invite her on and we can talk more about that. We're into, like, all the same things. She's super into wellness, so she'll come on too and share about all the things she's doing and she's into, because she has a lot of, like, traditional knowledge that I think is really interesting that someone just, like, needs to extract. Because I think a lot of times with family traditions or societal traditions or cultural traditions, whatever that is, like, it's not that easy to pass down unless someone's interested in extracting that knowledge. And some people just don't know where to begin. It's, like, so rooted in your culture that, like, this is how we do things, that you don't take a second to think, like, wow, Americans don't do any of this. You know, I was reading somewhere that there was, like, a influencer talking about not drinking fluids while you eat and how it dilutes your HCl, which essentially is what's helping you, the acid that's helping you digest your food. And if you have a lot of liquids while you're eating, then that's diluting the acid and enzymes that are gonna help you break down your food. And I was thinking, like, my grandma never drank water or any fluid or liquid while she ate. Like, that was really important to her. And that's probably because she knew that, or intuitively was understanding that just through our culture. But I think if you're listening, like, I think it's super interesting to ask, if you're from a different culture, like, ask your parents, ask your grandparents, like, why do we do this in our culture? What are the reasons? And really honoring that, because that's part of your heritage. And for me, saffron's a really big part of my heritage, so that's, like, come out in my work. But in terms of, like, wellness and well-being and alternative healing. I'm really passionate about it because my parents weren't able to do any of this work and weren't able to necessarily focus on themselves because they were in survival mode for so long. And I feel like it was my duty, because I was able to take time and travel and work on myself and care about my own well-being and health and all that, that it was like my duty to share what I know with others, because most people can't go travel and learn about different herbs and that sort of thing. So that's part of my story. There's a lot to learn, but that will come. But I wanted to kind of like segue into questions that people have asked me to answer. And so those don't really like tie in with each other, but I want to start answering like questions that you guys ask on. You can like DM me if you have a question and I'll answer it on a podcast once a month. Okay, so one question someone had was the impact alcohol has on health. So this person knows that I don't drink, so I didn't share that, but I stopped drinking when I really, really like intentionally decided that I don't want to drink anymore when I started teaching yoga. So I was really into yoga, and then in college I started teaching. And that's not when I stopped fully drinking, but it just made more sense to me that if I'm going to be teaching other people to be mindful, like it doesn't make sense for me to be going out to parties and drinking alcohol. Not saying that like you're not mindful if you do that, but alcohol is a downer. It's a depressant. It's not good for you. It is really, really bad for your liver. We all know this. It's so horrible for your gut. Like if you just take a second to think about the fact that alcohol like can fully destroy and sterilize your gut, and like the whole conversation in the wellness world is about gut health, then you realize like it's so counterproductive to drink alcohol while also trying to be on a health protocol. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, instead of wasting all of your money on supplements and stuff, like just don't drink alcohol and you'll be 100 times healthier. Obviously I don't know the stat on that, but I know that you don't need alcohol at all. And like, it's not biblical times when you're like in communion and having wine. Like that wine is completely different. That wine was true, like a true ferment, like a beautiful ferment that was probably healing for your gut, rather than like the type of alcohol we have now that's stripped of everything, full of sugar, full of yeast, full of like GMOs. I mean, alcohol doesn't require labeling. Like you're not required to understand like what's in your wine, what's in my vodka, what was used to process this, like what is happening to my body from this. Like there's no education on that. And I don't necessarily have that data, but what I do have is like anecdotal data that just like, if you don't feel good, like if you can get poisoned, if you're gonna have your stomach pumped, if you drink too much of this, then like what's the point? Or like hydration too. Like, yeah, a lot of people, like, it's like, I have a glass of wine, a glass of water, and a glass of wine, and a glass of water to stay hydrated. But like, at the end of the day, I mean, like, not even going into the water that's people are drinking, tap water, and like what's in that, and like all the pharmaceuticals, like that's not even, there's nothing that is going to be able to counteract the poison that is alcohol that's going in your body. And I think it's really cool right now. I mean, I used to be like really, really, really passionate about sharing this with people. And now I just like, I'll share it on Instagram or I'll repost. Like I love Dr. Will Cole because he goes into it, because people don't want to hear it. And he's willing to post like, this isn't good, stop drinking it. And if you really want to, for some celebration, like that's when you go to like hard kombucha. And like that should be the extent of it. And yeah, like tequila is probably the best hard alcohol if you're going to have hard alcohol. I used to love tequila. Like I was literally part of the tequila club in college where I would like go to this bar and like it was a thing. You go and drink every single type of tequila that they offer. And then at the end you get a shirt. I never even picked up my shirt like at the end, but I just remember loving going there and like having a shot. And obviously there's like fun community aspect to that, but I just feel like you can get that community and you can go out to the bar and you can go do all those things if like you're single and you're young and you feel like this is kind of the time in your life where all of your friends are doing that and you feel like you need to in order to join in on the fun. Like you can still go have fun without it, and honestly you're gonna feel so much better and you're going to learn so much about yourself and what you're capable of feeling without having to take a substance, that it's just so beautiful. I remember like in high school, I used to smoke cigarettes, and in college in Oregon, like everyone smokes, and I used to smoke there until my sophomore year. I was like, if I don't stop now, like I'll never stop. Like I'll be a smoker, and that's gross to me. Like I don't want to be a smoker. And I like turned to my husband, who I'd been dating for like 3.5 years at the time. And I was like, I'm going to quit smoking, and I can't be with someone who smokes either. Like, so either you're in or you're out, because like I want to quit, and that's really important to me, and I can't like be around it. And so we just like both quit cold turkey. I mean, I think he like a couple times, there are stories I can share that like he fully, you know, he was drunk and like smoked or whatever. I was pissed. But like for the most part, you know, we both like made the commitment, we're going to quit smoking because we don't want to be smokers and we know this is bad. So like same thing happened to me with alcohol. I was just like, I don't want to drink alcohol. I mean, I can't like make someone else stop either, but I was really passionate about sharing that. And now it's been over a year and my husband doesn't drink either. And I'm like in shock. Like I used to nag at him because I hated it. I just hated it so much. And I just like, once you stop drinking, like the smell is gross. Everything that's associated with drinking just like becomes gross, but it takes time. So like you'll go to bars, like you can go do all these other things. And like at first it might feel like, I don't even want to go there because I can't drink. Like that's how my husband was, at least. He'd be like, well, why would I want to go somewhere if I can't drink? And I'd be like, well, because it's not about drinking. It's about like hanging out. But because of society, like it's not like my husband had a drinking problem. Like he toned it down, like way down once we had kids and stuff. But it still was just like around and whatever. And I think once you stop and then you hang out with friends and you realize like I'll just have sparkling water and lime and like no one will notice and it doesn't matter. But I think it can be hard, and I definitely have had my fair share of like friends being self-conscious being around me, like for not drinking, like saying, you know, you're making me feel uncomfortable because you're not having a drink, and I am. But it's like, that's your own thing. I'm just a mirror to yourself because you're actually uncomfortable drinking, and like you should look into that. You know, we should all just like look into our habits. But I think alcohol is like a psyop, and I think that it is just like a way to dumb people down, and I just personally like don't want to partake in that anymore. So anytime I hear someone doesn't drink, like I get really excited. Okay, so the next thing is baby products you use for your children. So I love Living Libations. She has like the Jai Baby Balm, and even things like fennel essential oil. So like when my babies wouldn't poop, which is like a whole mind F in and of its own, like as a mom, fennel essential oil does the trick. And like you can dilute it in coconut oil and like rub it on their belly button, and then like do bicycle with their legs or just kind of move in clockwise position, and that really helps with them in terms of their digestion and getting it going. I also didn't like, it's almost like it's not necessarily baby products I used, but it's almost like baby products I didn't use. And I didn't use like anything on my kids. I didn't wash their hair for like a year. I just used water. Like, they don't need it. And I wanted to contain all of their beautiful natural oils in their hair. I didn't want to strip their skin. So instead of using soap and on their body, and instead of using shampoo or conditioner, I don't even know, do people condition their baby's hair? Like, probably not. I just didn't use anything. I just used water, and I use filtered water. So my whole house is filtered. If you don't have a whole house filter or can't get a shower filter and under counter filter. So I use, I don't use one, but this is like a great brand. I don't use one because I do have a whole house filter, but Joy, or Joie, they're a really great shower filter. And that's awesome for people to use. And then you can like use that for your baby when you bathe or shower them. And then you can get an under counter filter. I love Pristine Hydro. It's like an RO, so it's a reverse osmosis, but then they remineralize it with magnesium and other things, because you don't want to strip the minerals, but you kind of have to strip the water to get all the pharmaceuticals and all the crap out of it. So then they also remineralize it. And then that's really good for children and moms and people in general. But yeah, for me, it was more like I just used coconut oil, and I would give them like baby massages, and I didn't really use very many things on them, and they never got diaper rash. And also, I made my own wipes. So I would buy these like bamboo wipes from Amazon. And then I would, like, every week was kind of different because I'm like not a creature of habit at all. So I just kind of mix it up, and like I would just get the bamboo wipes wet and like make a stack of it, because you could get like at home wipe holders and also travel ones. So you can like make your own wipes, like buying dry wipes and then adding like essential oils and colloidal silver and filtered water or spring water and like rose water, that sort of thing, to your wipes. Because a lot of the wipes people buy right now, it's like 99.9% water. But it's not all water, because they have to make sure it doesn't go moldy. So they have like antibacterials in them. And I don't use antibacterial soap. It's like an antibiotic essentially for your skin. So I like made sure my children never wash their hands with antibacterial soap. And so I don't want that on their skin. So I don't buy those 99.9% wipes. I just make my own, and it makes me feel comfortable. And if I need something to make sure it doesn't get moldy, then I just use colloidal silver. Okay, next question. Ear remedy. Okay, ear infection. So I have this, like, my son hates if I put drops in his ear. And if I could, then I would do the olive oil, garlic olive oil. It's like Mullein. That's what it's called. I think it's like Mullein oil, Mullein. And essentially, like, you would put that in their ear and use like a warm compress on that ear, and you just use like a couple drops. That's really great for infection. But my son literally has let me do that once, and it was a battle, and he just doesn't like it. Like, I've tried putting diluted hydrogen peroxide in his ear if I knew for a fact he had swimmer's ear, but that's been difficult as well. So the best thing that's worked for us is this homeopathic remedy. It's called Siddha. So Siddha remedies, they have like a bunch of different kinds. This one is the hearing one. But like, you can get homeopathic eardrops, or you could get this spray, and this spray uses the same homeopathics, but it just goes in through the mouth. So my son tends to like only let me do that, and it works really, really well. So my 3 things for ear infection or ear aches are the Siddha hearing remedy, which I just suggest, like, if you're listening to this and it's something you're interested in, just go on Amazon and order it so you have it on hand, because earaches are one of those things that just always happen in the middle of the night and it's a nightmare. So just have it on hand. The other thing is like saffron, just our saffron latte. It's really warming, it's really healing, it's an anti-inflammatory. So it feels good for them to have something to drink that they feel like is going to make them feel better and maybe help them go back to sleep. So obviously you want to get your kid to go back to sleep once they're like complaining about an earache, and that's just like super helpful. And the third thing is, like, if you have access, ozone therapy, ear insufflation. So just ozone through the ear, and try your very, 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 very best to not give any antibiotics. So if you have a doctor that you know, or a chiropractor, I'm going to look up the link really quick right now, and we'll definitely put it in the show notes. But that's like the best way to prevent antibiotic use is by doing the ozone remedy. The link is to like doctors worldwide that offer ozone therapy. So that's just something you should just keep, whether it's for an ear infection or it's for anything else that you're dealing with, like antifungal, it's anti-cancer, it's like preventative, it's super healing if there is an issue. So I highly recommend ozone therapy to anyone and everyone I know. It helps like clear up even like yeast, UTIs, bacteria. Like you can do nasal, you can do ear, you could do rectal, you could do vaginal. So depending on what you're going through, like it's super healing and regenerative. So it just regenerating the cells. It's very oxygenating so that your cells regenerate faster and heal faster. So it's just a great remedy that's not talked about a lot that I love to share about. But those are the questions I'm going to answer today, and we'll do this every month. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I went on like multiple rants, but I'm excited to kind of share with you guys a little bit more about my personal life and have my family members on as well. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time.